Hey friends, welcome back to BIMvoice. Today I have the pleasure to talk to Vuca Spajic. I am really thrilled about this talk because I really want to learn more smart ways to use BlenderBIM. And that's exactly what he is going to show me today. Hi Vukas, how are you doing?
Hey, Petru, really good, man. Really good. Thanks for having me on.
I was very excited about this for a long time. I'm really looking forward to learn these new tricks from you, man. So thank you very much for joining me.
No problem, man.
Before we go and jump in, tell us a few words about you. Who are you? Where do you live? What you do, and so on.
All right, I'll try and keep it short. But yeah, my name's Vuca Spajic. You pronounced it really almost perfectly. I grew up in Melbourne, in Australia. Yeah, but the name comes from Serbia. So my parents are Serbian. I grew up in Melbourne, studied at the University of Melbourne. I finished engineering degree there. Worked in Australia for about 5 or 6 years, I think. Then I worked in New Zealand for 2 years. I was then a freelancer for a couple of years after that. Worked in Germany for a couple of years, actually 3 or 4, I think. And now I'm living in Vienna. So, just your typical story.
Quite a journey. Do you have a family? Or you move around only by yourself?
I did. I mean, I used to move around a lot because I didn't have, any immediate family. But, now I'm married and I have a beautiful little daughter. Her name's Lara, and yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So are you settling in Vienna, in Austria? Is your wife from Austria or Germany?
No, my wife's Serbian as well. We started living together actually in Germany, and then we moved to Austria, and yeah, we're both living in Vienna, and the plan is stay here for long term. I'm sick of moving all the time. That's behind me. That's in my 20s.
It makes sense to put some roots somewhere. But that's a bit interesting, leaving the sunny Australia for grumpy Europe, and especially mountain and the cold winter side and so on.
Yeah, it's funny. All my colleagues here, they ask me, why the hell are you here? They all want to go to Australia. But I try and explain to them that people in Australia, or, at least in Melbourne, there's a big European community, and everyone's kind of always thinking about Europe as the promised land. So,
Really?
Yeah, really. And after, 25 years or so, I thought, you know what? It's time to try something new. I've spent my whole life in Australia. Let's try Europe. So here I am, and I like it. I think I'm here to stay.
Sorry for asking so many personal questions. We digress, but it was really interesting to find out about that. I know a few other people, but not many of them who moved to Europe from Australia. But mostly I know a lot of people going from here to Australia. So yeah.
Yeah. I imagine. Yeah, I'm sure maybe one day I'll go back, but for now, yeah.
Okay, but now career-wise, what are you doing? What is your education and what is your job? What do you do?
I do a little bit of everything. I started as a structural engineer. That was basically my first job. I worked as a structural engineer for, I think, almost 7 years actually, for various companies, and then as a freelancer. And then at some point, I thought, you know what, I want to try something else. So I did some project management, and then eventually got into BIM. And here I am in Vienna. I'll fast forward a little bit. And, if I could best describe my role, it's kind of like, a BIM process expert. And I work for a company that really focuses on construction, but also design engineering as well. So I do a little bit of app development, and I'm kind of in this shift in my career where I'm now focusing on coding a lot.
BIM process leader, or how you say, like that's BIM manager. Different, like a bit more focused on something, but there is no like the same job description for any BIM manager job or BIM coordinator, right? So that's cool. But I did not really understand. Is this a constructor, like a general contractor company, or a software company, or?
No, so originally, I mean, I have no problem saying it. So it's a company called POR. It's one of the largest construction companies.
Oh, POR. Okay.
Yeah,
I know POR. Okay.
But I actually work for a subset of POR, so it's actually called POR Design Engineering. And so we do, like I said, design engineering, BIM management. We support clients, and we also do in-house, software development. So it's really cool gig.
Yeah, that sounds very good. And what are you using? Are you using Python or JavaScript? Do you use more languages, or what do you do?
The team is using, a lot of languages. I'm not exactly an experienced developer, so I'd probably be the worst person to ask what technology stacks we're all using. But me personally, I'm using, obviously, because of IFC OpenShell, a lot of Python, JavaScript for creating websites and that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, cool. Enough chattering. Let's go to action. Show me some cool stuff, man.
Yeah, sure. Let me share my screen. Maybe I just wanted to say, one of the reasons why, I got into BlenderBIM to start with is, I'll show some of the things I use here, but there's so many softwares that are being used in the market, that are quite bad at working with IFC. And this is actually initially what kind of got me started with BlenderBIM and open source software in general.
Actually, you joined the OSR community and you discovered BlenderBIM quite recently, right? Because I did not see you for a long time in the community, in the chat.
I went to Ozarch because I was really frustrated with some of the software, like I said, that I was using, and it's not always just Revit. People like to hate Revit, but there's other software, especially in the construction process world, where there's premium software that has the polish and the documentation of early open source projects. And then you go to a place like Ozarch, where you can really meet some cool people. You can learn how to code, and you can learn IFC on a level that you probably can't do anywhere else. So it's a really special place.
I agree. There are some special people, starting with Ian, Thomas, Duncan, and more, contributing a lot. And it's a very nice place to meet these guys. And let's hope that this community will manage to have a bigger impact in the bigger picture of the AAC. At some point.
I absolutely agree. Okay, so we're in BlenderBIM. Blender, you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's open up just a project. So this is just, unfortunately I can't use any actual projects. I'm just using a sample IFC file here. And essentially what I want to show is what's relevant to someone like me. People think about BIM and they generally focus on, let's say, the CAD software or the design stage. But, and as important as it is, there's a lot of stuff we can do with all that interesting data after a model's been created. We're talking about tendering, talking about planning a construction site, purchasing materials, organizing logistics, creating schedules, really detailed cost estimations, optimization stuff. Like, it's so cool. And it's a shame not to use all that data. So my use case for BlenderBIM is, receiving models that we haven't modeled internally. Okay, so this would be a scenario where, I'll have a look at a model and the geometry looks actually pretty good, right? So it's something that I can probably start with, right? But the parameters are either shit, they're missing, or, they're just all over the place, as you often know, is the case. Yeah. So I open up Blend,
Just one quick small question. Are you using also other tools to verify this? Are you using Solibri or something similar?
Actually, not anymore.
But you used it before. You have experienced using it.
Yes, I've used all the usual suspects, like Navisworks, Solibri, the site. I mean, there's all these other softwares. And I'm not an open source absolutist. I'm not someone who's going to say, I'm only going to use open source software. I just use whatever makes my life easier. And the fact that I'm using BlenderBIM is because it makes my life easier. And some things are just better here. And because it's open source, I can make sure that what it's telling me it's doing is really what it's doing,
And it's native IFC. That's the most important thing. It's the only tool that you will find, actually.
Exactly. Yeah, it's fantastic. But there's other software, open source software that I use as well. So I don't know if you know of a software called XBIM Explorer.
No, I don't. I did not hear about it.
Maybe I'll quickly show you what that looks like.
What do you use that for?
So the thing I like using XBIM Explorer for, it's really like it's a bare bones desktop viewer, but it has a really nice and quick validate feature. So if you just import an IFC file into XBIM Explorer, you click on validate, and it quickly shows you a summary of any errors if they exist in the model. And typically, it's whether the syntax is correct in the IFC file, whether the geometry has any issues, and it's really quick, and it's just kind of really nice, gives a report, and this gives me a quick idea of whether the model I'm working with is usable or whether it's kind of shit. I need to.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't see it. Did you take it up to show it to me, or? I don't see it in your screen.
You don't see it? No. Okay. Sorry,
maybe you are showing me the other screen or something like that if you have more screens.
So this is XBIM Explorer. Just Google XBIM Explorer. It's open source.
Free open source, or you need to buy
free.
it?
No. It's absolutely free.
And is it updated today, or it's an old software that nobody is using anymore?
No, it is. I mean, if you open up the GitHub page, you'll notice that the issues are recent, and also the updates are recent. So they had a commit as recently as September 5.
Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. But
Yeah, exactly.
I guess you can do the same stuff with BlenderBIM as well.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason why I'm saying this is because, and I think Dion has said this a couple of times as well, is open source is kind of this big, beautiful thing, and you shouldn't just be using BlenderBIM. You should be using everything you can. Whatever makes your life easier. And as I said, in my workflow, I use some paid software and I use some open source software, and all that. My only criteria is that it works, that I can trust it, and that it brings me value. If an open source product is free, but it doesn't bring me any value, then I'm not going to use it. Simple as that, But as you said, what I just showed you in XP Explorer, you can actually do with BlenderBIM as well. The only reason why I don't do it is only just because I'm used to XP Explorer, honestly. And I could probably do it here, and I'll even show you how you could do it in BlenderBIM a little bit later if you want. After validating it in XP Explorer or BlenderBIM, and there are no crazy issues, then what I usually like to do is first, just have an overall look at the model. Basically, I'll literally sit there and I'll play around with the model and I'll start filtering it. So one thing I'll also do is look at the project's browser or the outliner here. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. People should look at the video with you and Dion where he talks about types and exploring the structure here. But I'll look at I'll do the same things as him. I'll check the types and I'll make sure that the types don't look ridiculous. As he mentioned, often you get from a Revit export, hundreds of types that are literally just copies of one another. And one thing I'll quickly look here is I'll look at how the stories are set up. One thing that's also a common issue is you get stories that are duplicated, or you have multiple stories that are offset by, say, the finished floor level or the raw floor level. And this is a mistake. You should have clear stories defined.
But I have a question regarding types. What do you do if you get, as you said, a lot of duplicates? What do you do in that case? Just provide feedback to somebody to fix it, or you fix it in BlenderBIM?
So it depends on what kind of relationship I have with the architect or the engineer, and what kind of contractual relationship I have. So if it's a well-defined project, then the original CAD user will be liable for fixing any issues, or these kinds of issues will have been documented in the BIM execution plan. But often this isn't the case, unfortunately, in our industry. But even so, sometimes I'll give an architect a quick call and ask them whether they're happy with their export, and whether maybe they might not want to try and fix it. Sometimes they do, really. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't have enough time, or they probably just don't want to. But I think Dion also showed you have in quality control here an IFC patch. I believe there's a recipe for merge duplicate types by tag. So I think this is something that he showed in the last video that you had with him. And this will kind of try and have a look at the types and merge ones that are actually the same. So that's one thing you could do. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But now a tricky question, right? Because I asked you already this in the chat in OSR. How do you make this sustainable? Because if you need, like, every time when the architect is issuing a new revision of the model, if he makes any changes, how do you make this sustainable so you don't need to fix this every time when you get a new export? Is there any way to do it?
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good question. One thing I'll say is that usually, if we're looking at the construction phase, this isn't that big of an issue because the frequency of your model updates isn't that fast. However, everything you see here, all the functionality that you see here is based on IFC OpenShell, right? So everything that's happening with the model is happening through IFC OpenShell, and there's nothing stopping you running IFC OpenShell and automating all these processes if you know what you're doing. What I mean is, and I think maybe Thomas, Heinen, and Dion mentioned this also as well. You could easily run IFC OpenShell on a server and automate a lot of these tasks. Especially if you do something once, you could kind of develop your own recipe, I guess, for working with a certain architect or with a certain model, and then try and reapply these things. So one example is the patches. You see this patch inside the BlenderBIM UI, but there's nothing stopping you from running this just directly in code or on a server. Scenario could be you automate the export of an IFC file, or you receive an IFC file. You automatically start running a list of patch recipes to do something with the file, right? And I think, if you're savvy enough, or if there's any companies listening to this right now, I think they should look into that for the future. Having said that, I don't like the idea of that. I think we should all be a little more emboldened to really give feedback back to the client, the owner of the building, I guess, in the end, and also to the architects. They need to know that they're making mistakes or they're doing things suboptimally.
I understand that completely. That is the right way to do it. But I've seen here BIM management tab at the top on Blender. You custom this view for BIM management, right? So
I think that's something we need to really improve with BlenderBIM, and the thing is, Dion and the other developers, working really hard on functionality and all this sort of stuff, and I think this stuff will come. But yeah, you can actually customize how everything looks and create different tabs, So I have here basically 2 tabs. I have BIM management, where I have on one panel, I have the object properties, and on one panel here, I have the scene, or what I like to call the project properties. And this kind of looks very similar to as you'd expect in something like, Revit, or maybe even the site or Bexel Manager. You have kind of separate windows or containers for specific functions. So this is what I like to have: object properties, and then my project properties here, as well as a view of the project browser. And then in scripting is what I use when I want to play around with some stuff, or write some small scripts to automate some stuff, or even just check whether what I'm assuming is actually correct.
Okay, I understand. Now, let me ask you something. I'm already sure that we will not manage to cover everything I want to in this video. Is it possible to continue another session some other time in the future to make a new talk? Because I will not I have so many questions. You have no idea. And I'll try to stick to the surface this time. But I have so many questions, like just looking at your screen right now, that you cannot even imagine. So now I will just leave you to go a bit, so generally, and maybe in the future, we can digress and dive a bit deeper into some specific aspects, if you will have time.
Definitely. It's an absolute honor talking with you, Petru. So I'll
thank you very much. I'm learning a lot from this, and I'm sure a lot of people will also learn. I think this, for me, the most important thing from this is that I hope that more people will learn and to start getting involved themselves in OSR, in the community, to understand how beautiful this community is, and that actually they can do something about that. If that the only thing that they can do about that is to send a feedback, or make a comment, or like a post on LinkedIn or something like that, everything adds up, and it has a huge, tremendous effect on promoting this more and spreading this. And because this is crucial. You are using this at your work. I am in the process of learning to use it at my work. Dion is using it at work for him, right? So this is already useful. Yeah, of course, it's not very user-friendly, like you said. We need to build more on that. But you cannot build a user interface if you don't have some functionality, right? But
I absolutely agree.
It's very, very important. So I really appreciate you taking the time and showing me this around. Like I said, I really hope that a lot of people will join the ranks, because this is really huge. Like a tool like this, free, open source, you can just start using it. You don't need to pay, I don't know how many thousands of euros just to have a license and to stress about it. No, you can just start using it.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I'm not sure, have you ever heard of the concept of the learning pyramid?
No.
You can see my screen still, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it's one thing I like to refer to, and the thing that's really changed my life, and it's this kind of difference between passive and active learning. So what I think of when I think of Ozarch and open source, it's this area of active learning. You have the Ozarch forums where people are asking all sorts of questions, and not just for BlenderBIM, all sorts of software. Then you have people, taking the software and actually trying to use it themselves, right? And then starting to code, right? Because they can read the code base and then maybe make some changes. And this is what I did, And then the last part is the teach others aspect. And there's something really funky, something really cool that happens on Ozarch and on open source forums, is that as soon as you ask a question, it's almost like there's a competition between other people to answer the question. It's really amazing. And even better, if you it's actually kind of like a meme. If you post a question, if you want the answer as soon as possible, you should log into another account and post the wrong answer, because there's nothing that pisses off all the people in the forum more than seeing a wrong answer, and then people will just quickly compete to fix it.
Oh my God, this is stay there for a second.
Sure.
That I never seen this. I never heard about this, but I always felt that I was growing, because if we think at what I am doing, it's discussion. Yeah. This is what I do all the time when I have these interviews. So I've been at 50% active learning since 2020. So that's really crazy. And now what you are doing is you are at the base of the pyramid right now, at the 90%. You are teaching me. You are teaching others about this.
I think there's a 100% level, and that is coding.
Okay. Yeah, but 90% still is not shabby at all.
90% I mean,
go ahead.
I used to think I was good at IFC, like I really understood it before I came to Vienna. I started looking in the Osage community, but only when I started trying to understand Dion's code in BlenderBIM and trying to understand IFC OpenShell, the code, did my mind start like really absorbing what it really is. And when you start coding and I started trying to improve some things in the UI and maybe add some functionality, it's like learning on steroids. It's really ridiculous.
Yeah, it's crazy. And just a last remark about that, if you go back to the picture, it's a huge difference from reading or from watching a video to join the discussion. From 20% you can jump to 50%. Definitely. Just if you are in this community and chatting, or just ask people around, or even if you watch the discussions, right? But at the same time, it helps more if you involve yourself. But it's very interesting. Like, this is really cool. I did not know about it, but it looks very, very interesting, and it resonates a lot with actually what I was feeling. Definitely. Because I was feeling that I was learning at a very accelerated pace from all this, from picking the brains to all these amazing people I'm talking to.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you recently talked to Thomas Zwieleiner Zwieleiner. Sorry, Thomas, if you're listening to this, the IFC doctor. And, he recently posted on LinkedIn, and he mentioned that he was like the commenter or the member of the month on the Building Smart forums, because he's constantly posting questions and starting discussions. And there's a reason why he's so knowledgeable. You ask Thomas about something IFC related, and you're probably gonna get a bloody good answer back, and it's probably because he's so active in the discussion forums.
Yeah, I did not even know about that community, so I will try to sneak a bit, have a look at it as well, because I didn't know about that until I saw his post. But that I learned something new from that. Yeah.